The stars above Earth had always looked peaceful. For most of human history, people looked up at the night sky and saw only quiet lights. They did not know that somewhere out there, in the deep dark, an empire was watching them. This empire was called the Kryvax Dominion, and it had ruled over hundreds of star systems for more than 1,000 years. The Kryvax were not kind rulers. They believed that only the strong deserved to live free. Every world they found, they either conquered or destroyed. Weak species became slaves. Strong species became targets to be crushed before they could grow. For the last 30 years, the Kryvax Dominion had been watching Earth. They had sent small scout ships, hidden with cloaking fields, to study the humans. What they saw did not worry them at first. Humans were still fighting wars among themselves. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak compared to Kryvax technology. Their fleet, if it could even be called that, was nothing more than a few dozen ships meant for exploring nearby planets and moons. To the Kryvax, Earth looked like an easy target, a world full of resources, full of a young and curious species that could be turned into obedient workers for the Empire. But the Kryvax did not know everything, and that was their first mistake. 32 years earlier, after the first Kryvax scout ship had been discovered by human scientists near Jupiter, the governments of Earth had come together in secret. It was the first time in history that every major nation on the planet agreed to work as one. They knew that if a scout ship existed, then a bigger threat could be coming. They could not tell the public the full truth, because panic would only make things worse. So instead, they built something in secret. A project so large, so expensive, and so hidden that only a small group of people in the entire world knew about it. They called it Project Chimera. The idea was simple to explain, but almost impossible to build. Humanity needed a warship. Not just any warship, but one so powerful it could stand against an alien empire. But there was a problem. If they built such a ship in orbit around Earth, any passing alien scout would see it right away. Earth needed to hide its greatest weapon somewhere no one would think to look. That is when a young engineer named Dr. Sarah Okafor gave them the answer. She said, "Hide it inside the moon." At first, people thought she was joking, but she explained her idea in full detail. The moon already had deep craters, and even deeper lava tubes, some large enough to fit skyscrapers inside. If humanity built a massive hidden base deep under the surface, inside one of these lava tubes, they could construct a warship there, piece by piece, safe from any alien eyes. The rock of the moon itself would block most scans, and even if someone did scan the moon, they would only see rock, dust, and empty tunnels, not the size of the machine growing inside. The idea was approved within a week. Governments moved trillions of dollars into secret accounts. Miners, engineers, and scientists from every corner of Earth were quietly gathered, given new identities, and sent to the moon to begin work. Families were told their loved ones had gone on special assignments. Some workers even believed they were building a simple mining colony, since only a small circle at the very top knew the truth about what they were really building. It took 28 years. The warship was named Prometheus, after the old myth of the being who gave fire to humanity, even though the gods forbade it. It felt right. Humanity was stealing power from beings far greater than itself, hiding it in secret, hoping it would be enough when the day finally came. Prometheus was unlike anything humans had built before. It was 3 kilometers long, shaped like a long blade, built from an alloy that mixed captured alien scrap metal with new materials, invented by human scientists working day and night. Its outer hull was covered in layers of armor thick enough to survive direct hits from plasma cannons. Its engines were powered by a small artificial star, a miniature fusion core that gave it more raw power than an entire Kryvax battle fleet combined. It carried weapons that no alien empire had ever seen before, weapons built from ideas that mixed captured alien technology with human creativity, a mixing of styles that created something new and unpredictable. But the ship was more than metal and weapons. It also carried people, nearly 12,000 of them, soldiers, pilots, engineers, doctors, and scientists, all of whom had spent years training in the tunnels beneath the moon, learning how to fight a war they hoped would never come. Their leader was a woman named Admiral Elena Cross, a calm and serious officer who had been chosen not because she wanted the position, but because she was one of the few people alive who understood both human military strategy and the small amount of Kryvax technology that Earth had managed to study. Elena had grown up as an ordinary girl in a coastal town, watching old science fiction movies with her father. She never imagined that one day she would command the greatest secret weapon humanity had ever built. But life has strange plans, and here she was, standing on the bridge of Prometheus, looking at a wall of screens that showed the deep black tunnels of the moon around her ship. "Status report," she said calmly to her crew. A young officer, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, answered from his station. "All systems still nominal, Admiral. We are fully hidden, fully charged. If they ever come, we will be ready." Marcus was young, only 29, but he had trained for this moment since he was 18. Like most of the crew, he barely remembered a life outside the moon base. He grew up inside these tunnels, trained in these halls, and now stood as one of the top tactical officers on the most powerful ship humanity had ever built. Elena nodded, but her eyes stayed on the screens. For years, they had waited. Scans from Earth's deep space telescopes, along with secret intelligence gathered from captured alien technology, told them that the Kryvax dominion was slowly expanding closer to human space. It was only a matter of time. That time came sooner than anyone expected. Far beyond the edge of the solar system, a massive Kryvax fleet moved silently through the dark. It was led by a war commander named General Dral Vex Thun, a proud and cruel leader who had crushed dozens of worlds under his command. Dral was not sent to conquer Earth completely, not yet. His mission was smaller, but just as dangerous for humanity. He had been ordered to take Earth's moon first. The Kryvax High Council had studied Earth carefully. They knew that taking a planet directly could be costly, even against a weak enemy, because defending a planet gave the defenders an advantage. But a moon, especially one with no real defenses, would be an easy prize. If the Kryvax controlled Earth's moon, they could build a forward base there. They could place massive cannons on its surface, capable of striking any point on Earth within minutes. It would break human morale before the real invasion even began. It was smart. It was cold. It was exactly the kind of plan the Kryvax were famous for. General Dral stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive vessel called the Devourer of Stars, and looked at the images of Earth's moon on his screen. To his sensors, it looked exactly as expected. A quiet gray rock, covered in craters, with a few small human structures near the surface used for mining and research. Nothing that could stop him. "Send word to the fleet," Dral said in his deep, rough voice. "We take the moon in one strike. No mercy, no hesitation. Let the humans watch their sky burn before we even touch their world." Around him, dozens of warships prepared for the attack. Fighters were fueled, weapons were charged, soldiers checked their armor, ready to land after the bombardment. To the Kryvax, this was just another simple conquest, one of hundreds they had performed across the galaxy. They had no idea that beneath the surface of that quiet gray moon, deep inside ancient lava tunnels, a machine of war, built by human hands over almost 3 decades, was waiting silently in the dark, its systems fully charged, its crew fully trained, ready for the moment the sky above them would light up with enemy fire. On Earth, in a heavily guarded bunker beneath the city of Geneva, a small group of government leaders and military officials watched the same signals that had reached the moon base. Long-range sensors, built using a mix of human science and small pieces of Kryvax technology, recovered from an old crashed scout ship years earlier, had detected the massive alien fleet approaching from beyond Jupiter. President Elias Grant, one of the very few world leaders who had known about Project Chimera from its earliest days, stood in front of a large screen showing the fleet's position. His face was pale, but his voice remained steady. "How long until they reach the moon?" he asked. A young analyst checked her readings. "At their current speed, sir, they will arrive within 18 hours. The room went silent. 18 hours. After 30 years of secret work, after trillions of dollars spent, after thousands of lives dedicated to building something the world did not even know existed, the moment they had all feared and hoped for was finally here. President Grant took a deep breath. "Send the signal," he said. "Wake up Prometheus." A special communication channel, built using deep tunnels and hardened cables buried beneath the lunar surface, carried the message directly to Admiral Elena Cross's ship. When it arrived, Elena read it twice before standing up from her chair. "All hands," she said over the ship's internal speakers, her voice calm but firm. This is Admiral Cross. The alert we have trained for has arrived. Alien forces are approaching Earth's moon. Estimated time of arrival is 18 hours. This is not a drill. For a moment, silence filled every corridor of Prometheus. Then, like a machine finally waking up after decades of sleep, the entire ship came alive. Engineers rushed to their stations, pilots ran to their fighter bays, soldiers checked their weapons one final time. Years of training, simulations, and preparation were about to be tested in the real world for the first time. Elena walked to the front of the bridge and looked at the massive display showing a live image of the moon's surface above them, still quiet, still peaceful, not knowing that within a few hours it would become the site of the first great battle between humanity and an alien empire. They think they are coming to take an empty rock, she said quietly to herself. They have no idea what is waiting for them. Behind her, Marcus Webb checked the ship's weapon systems one final time, watching as the miniature star at the heart of Prometheus's engine core pulsed with barely contained power. Far above, in the black emptiness of space, General Draal's fleet continued its journey toward the moon, confident, proud, and completely unaware of the secret buried deep beneath the surface they were about to attack. The countdown had begun. In 18 hours, the true test of humanity's greatest secret would begin, and neither side would ever be the same again. The 18 hours before the attack felt like the longest hours in human history. Deep inside the moon, in the hidden chambers of Prometheus, every soul aboard the ship prepared for what was coming. There was no more time for doubt. There was only time to check, recheck, and check again. Admiral Elena Cross walked through the long corridors of her ship, stopping at different stations to speak with her crew. She was not a woman who liked giving big speeches. She believed in showing calm through actions rather than words. Still, she knew that some of her people needed to hear something from her before the battle began. She stopped at the medical bay first, where Dr. Amara Singh, the ship's chief physician, was preparing emergency stations with her team. Rows of medical beds stood ready, along with equipment for treating everything from burns to radiation sickness to the strange effects that alien plasma weapons could have on the human body. "Are we ready, Doctor?" Elena asked. Amara looked up from her work, her eyes tired but focused. "As ready as we can be, Admiral. I just hope we don't need most of this." "So do I," Elena said softly. She continued walking until she reached the main hangar bay, where hundreds of fighter pilots stood beside their small, fast attack ships called Falcons. These fighters were built to work together with Prometheus, striking enemy ships from angles the larger warship could not easily reach. The pilots were mostly young, some barely in their mid-20s, trained since childhood for a war they had never truly believed would come until now. One of the senior pilots, Captain Diego Reyes, saluted as Elena approached. "Admiral, the squadron is ready. We've run the simulations 1,000 times. We know what to do." Elena studied his face for a moment. Behind his confident words, she could see the same fear that lived in everyone's heart that day. Fear was normal. Fear kept people careful. What mattered was not letting that fear turn into panic. "Listen to me," she said, raising her voice slightly so the pilots nearby could hear as well. "None of us asked for this war. It found us anyway. But for 30 years, we prepared for this exact moment. Every one of you was trained by the best minds Earth has ever produced. You are not fighting alone today. You are fighting beside a ship that carries more power than anything those aliens have ever seen. Trust your training. Trust each other. And we will make it through this." The pilots straightened, some nodding firmly, others simply staring ahead with quiet determination. It was not a long speech, but it was enough. Elena returned to the bridge just as Lieutenant Marcus Webb called out new sensor readings. "Admiral, long-range scanners show the Kryvax fleet has entered the outer solar system. Current estimate puts them at the moon in 6 hours." 6 hours, Elena repeated. "Bring up the full battle plan." The main screen changed, showing a detailed simulation of the moon and the space around it. Prometheus was marked in blue, hidden deep beneath the lunar surface inside a massive cavern carved out over decades. Around the moon, small human sensor buoys, disguised as harmless space debris, were positioned to track enemy movement without being detected. On the surface, hidden beneath layers of rock and dust, sat several powerful weapon platforms, another part of Project Chimera, ready to strike the moment the order was given. Once the enemy fleet reaches orbit, Marcus explained, walking the officers through the plan, our surface platforms will remain hidden until Prometheus makes its first move. We cannot risk revealing our position too early. The plan calls for allowing the Kryvax to begin their attack, believing the moon to be undefended. Once their fleet is spread out and focused on bombardment, Prometheus will launch from beneath the surface, catching them completely off guard. It was a risky plan. It meant allowing the enemy to strike the moon's surface first, possibly destroying human structures, and any remaining personnel who had not been evacuated in time. But military leaders on Earth and aboard Prometheus had agreed that surprise was their greatest weapon. If the Kryvax knew about the hidden warship before the battle began, they could adjust their strategy and possibly bring in a larger fleet from nearby systems. All non-essential personnel have already been evacuated from the surface, Elena confirmed. The only people remaining above us are volunteers, running decoy signals to make the Kryvax believe the moon still holds basic human activity. She looked around the bridge at her officers. We only get one chance to surprise them. Let's make sure we use it well. Meanwhile, far above, General Drowl's fleet continued its approach. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, Drowl received updates from his scouts, small stealth drones sent ahead to study the moon in detail. General, said his second-in-command, an officer named Call Thresh, scans confirm minimal activity on the lunar surface, a handful of small structures, likely mining outposts, no military presence detected. Drowl nodded, satisfied. As expected. The humans believe their little rock is too unimportant to defend. That will make our work easier. He studied the images on his screen, the pale gray surface of the moon slowly growing larger as his fleet approached. To him, it looked exactly like hundreds of other worlds his empire had conquered before. Weak, undefended, and unaware of what was coming. Prepare all ships for bombardment formation, Drowl ordered. We strike the surface first, destroy any structures, then land ground forces to secure key positions. Once the moon is fully under our control, we begin construction of the forward base. Throughout the fleet, dozens of warships shifted into position, forming a wide circle around the moon. Massive plasma cannons, capable of melting through solid rock, powered up along the hulls of the largest ships. Smaller attack craft prepared to launch, ready to sweep the surface for any remaining resistance after the main bombardment. None of them noticed the small, quiet human sensor buoys scattered carefully throughout the area, silently recording every movement, every formation, and every weapon readiness level, sending the information straight back to Prometheus, far below the surface. Back on the bridge of the hidden warship, Marcus watched the data streaming in from the buoys. Admiral, we have full visual and tactical data on the enemy fleet. 32 warships confirmed. Formation suggests they plan to bombard the surface directly above several key points, including old mining outposts. Elena studied the formation carefully. They are spreading out, not staying together. Good. That will make it easier for us when the time comes. She turned to her communications officer. Send the final warning signal to Earth Command. Tell them the enemy fleet has arrived, and battle is imminent. Within moments, President Grant and his advisors in Geneva received the message. The room fell silent as they watched real-time footage from the moon's orbit, feeds captured by the hidden sensor buoys and relayed back through secure channels. This is it, President Grant said quietly. He turned to his military advisors. Give the final order. A message was sent back to Prometheus, short but heavy with meaning. Proceed with the plan. Godspeed. High above the moon, General Drowl raised his hand, giving the signal for the attack to begin. Along the fleet, dozens of plasma cannons fired at once, sending bright streaks of deadly energy down toward the lunar surface. The old mining structures, evacuated hours earlier, were destroyed instantly, turned into clouds of dust and debris. Craters that had existed for millions of years were joined by new ones, carved out in seconds by alien firepower. Aboard Prometheus, the entire crew felt the distant tremors as the bombardment shook the rock above them. Alarms flashed briefly before being silenced by trained hands. Elena gripped the edge of her command chair tightly, watching the chaos unfold on her screens, forcing herself to wait for the right moment. Steady, she said, more to herself than anyone else. Let them come closer. Let them believe they've already won. Above the moon, Satisfied with the destruction of the surface structures, General Drawl ordered a portion of his fleet to begin preparing landing craft, ready to send ground troops down to secure the area. Other ships remained in orbit, continuing to scan for any unexpected activity, though their sensors still showed nothing beyond rock and dust. It was the perfect moment. "Admiral," Marcus said, his voice tight with focus. "Enemy formation has spread as predicted. Multiple ships preparing to land troops. Weapon systems currently focused on ground targets, not deep space threats." Elena took a slow breath. 30 years of secret work, sacrifice, and preparation had led to this single moment. "All hands, this is Admiral Cross," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Prepare for launch sequence. Today, the galaxy learns that Earth is not as weak as they believed." Throughout the ship, engineers activated the massive engines, hidden deep within the lunar rock. The artificial star at the heart of Prometheus began to glow brighter, sending waves of energy through the ship's systems. Thick layers of rock and dust that had hidden the warship for decades began to shake, as hidden mechanisms, built specifically for this moment, prepared to open a path to the surface. Above, completely unaware, General Drawl watched his landing craft descend toward the moon, confident that his conquest was already complete. He had no idea that just beneath his feet, hidden in the darkness of the lunar rock, an ancient myth was about to come true. Fire, stolen and hidden for 30 years, was finally about to be unleashed. The ground shook. Deep beneath the lunar surface, giant mechanisms that had waited in silence for almost 30 years finally began to move. Massive doors, hidden under layers of rock and dust, and disguised to look like natural craters, slowly opened. Dust and small rocks fell away, revealing a huge dark opening in the side of the moon. Inside that opening, a bright light began to grow. It was the light of Prometheus, preparing to launch. Aboard the bridge, Admiral Elena Cross watched the countdown on her screen. Every second felt heavier than the last. This was the moment 30 years of secret work had been building toward. There was no turning back now. "Engines at full power," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb. "Launch doors fully open. We are ready, Admiral." Elena nodded once. "Take us out." The massive warship began to move, sliding slowly out from its hidden chamber, deep inside the moon. As it emerged into open space, sunlight reflected off its dark, armored hull, for the first time in 3 decades. For a moment, it looked almost peaceful, a giant blade of metal rising silently from the surface of the moon, like something out of an old legend. But peace did not last long. High above, aboard the Devourer of Stars, sensor officers suddenly began shouting in alarm. A massive object, far larger than anything they had detected before, had appeared out of nowhere, rising from what their scans had told them was nothing but solid rock. "General Drawl," one officer called out, his voice shaking. "Unknown vessel detected. It is emerging directly from the lunar surface. Size is far beyond anything in our records." Drawl turned sharply toward the screen, his confident expression replaced instantly by confusion and anger. "That is impossible. Our scans showed nothing there. Identify that vessel immediately." Before his officers could respond, sensors detected new activity across the surface of the moon. Hidden weapon platforms, buried beneath rock for decades, revealed themselves one by one, their targeting systems locking onto the surprised Kryvax landing craft, still descending toward the surface. "General, multiple weapon signatures detected on the surface. They were hidden. The humans had this entire time prepared for us." Drowl's grip tightened on the edge of his command chair. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something he had not felt in years: uncertainty. "All ships, defensive formation," he roared. "Target that vessel immediately. Do not let it gain any advantage." But it was already too late. Aboard Prometheus, Elena watched as her ship fully emerged from the moon, engines glowing bright as it turned to face the scattered Kryvax fleet. "Weapons online," she ordered calmly. "Target their landing craft first. We save as many surface structures from further destruction as possible, and we cut off their ground forces before they can regroup." "Weapons locked," Marcus confirmed, firing. Prometheus unleashed its first strike. Along its long, blade-like hull, massive cannons fired streams of concentrated energy, striking multiple Kryvax landing craft at once. Explosions bloomed silently in the vacuum of space, as ship after ship was destroyed, before it could even reach the lunar surface. The hidden weapon platforms on the ground joined the attack, firing up at the confused and scattered Kryvax fleet. Ships that had been focused on bombarding what they believed was an empty moon suddenly found themselves under fire from multiple directions at once. Panic spread quickly through the Kryvax fleet. Ships that had spent the last hour in relaxed formation, confident in an easy victory, scrambled to reposition, but the surprise attack had already caused heavy damage. Several smaller warships were destroyed within the first few minutes of battle, their wreckage scattering silently through space. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, General Draal watched in disbelief as his fleet, which had conquered dozens of worlds without difficulty, was suddenly being torn apart by a single massive human warship and a handful of hidden ground weapons. "How is this possible?" he muttered, staring at the tactical display. "Primitive humans, hiding a warship this size, for how long?" He forced himself to focus. Anger would not save his fleet, strategy would. "Regroup all remaining ships around the flagship," he ordered. "Focus all firepower on that vessel. If we destroy it, their ground weapons will mean nothing." Slowly, the surviving Kryvax ships began to regroup, moving into a tighter formation around the Devourer of Stars. Weapons that had been aimed at the moon's surface now turned toward the massive human warship rising before them. Elena watched the enemy formation shift on her screen. "They're regrouping around their flagship," she said. "Marcus, launch fighter squadrons. Keep their smaller ships busy while we focus on breaking their main formation." "Launching now," Marcus confirmed. Deep within Prometheus, the hangar bay doors opened, and hundreds of Falcon fighters shot out into space, engines glowing bright as they moved to engage the scattered Kryvax ships. Among them, Captain Diego Reyes led his squadron directly toward a group of enemy fighters that had launched moments earlier from a damaged Kryvax cruiser. "Stay in formation," Diego called out over the comms to his squadron. "Remember your training. Hit and move. Don't stay in one place too long." The fighters moved with practiced precision, weaving between enemy fire as they targeted key systems on the smaller Kryvax ships. Years of simulated combat had prepared them for this moment, and though real battle was far more chaotic than any simulation, their training held strong. Meanwhile, Prometheus turned its full attention toward the Kryvax formation, gathering around the Devourer of Stars. Massive energy cannons along its hull began charging for a much larger strike. "Admiral," Marcus reported, "enemy flagship is charging its main weapon. If that hits us directly, it could cause serious damage to our outer hull." "Then we don't give them the chance," Elena said firmly. "Divert full power to forward shields and prepare our own main cannon. Target their flagship directly." Deep within the heart of Prometheus, the miniature artificial star that powered the ship began to glow even brighter, sending waves of energy through massive conduits toward the ship's primary weapon, a devastating cannon built specifically to counter the largest Kryvax warships. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, sensors detected the massive buildup of energy from the human vessel. "General, that ship is charging some kind of main weapon. Power levels they are far beyond anything we've seen from human technology before." Draal's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, real fear crept into his mind. He had underestimated this species badly, and now he was beginning to understand just how badly. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "Full power to shields." But before his crew could fully respond, Prometheus fired. A massive beam of concentrated energy shot across the battlefield, striking the Devourer of Stars directly along its side. The impact was devastating. Shields that had protected the flagship through dozens of previous battles shattered instantly under the force of the strike. Sections of the massive ship's hull were torn apart, explosions rippling along its length as internal systems failed one after another. Alarms blared throughout the Kryvax flagship as Draal struggled to maintain control. "Damage report," he demanded. "Multiple decks destroyed. Main power core critically damaged. We are losing life support in several sections." Draal stared at the human warship on his screen, its massive form now fully visible against the backdrop of the moon, its weapons already recharging for another devastating strike. This was not the easy conquest he had expected. This was something far more dangerous. "All remaining ships," he ordered, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Focus all fire on that vessel immediately. We cannot allow it to fire again." Across the battlefield, the remaining Kryvax warships turned their weapons toward Prometheus, unleashing a storm of plasma fire toward the massive human vessel. Elena watched calmly, as the incoming attacks lit up her screens. "Shields holding," Marcus reported. "Minor damage to outer hull, nothing critical." Elena allowed herself a small, tight smile. 30 years of preparation had built a ship strong enough to withstand exactly this kind of assault. "Good," she said. "Now let's show them exactly what humanity can do." The battle above the moon had only just begun, but already, the balance of power had shifted in ways General Draal and his empire could never have imagined. What they had believed would be an easy conquest had turned into the first true test of humanity's hidden strength, and Earth was determined not to lose. Space around the moon had become a storm of fire and light. Explosions bloomed silently in the vacuum, wreckage from destroyed ships tumbling in every direction, while smaller fighters darted between the larger warships, like insects, weaving through a battle of giants. What had begun as an easy conquest for the Kryvax Dominion had turned into a desperate fight for survival. Aboard Prometheus, Admiral Elena Cross studied the battlefield with sharp focus. Her ship had already proven it could withstand heavy fire, but she knew the fight was far from over. General Draal still had over 20 warships remaining, and though scattered and damaged, they were regrouping with the discipline of a species that had conquered hundreds of worlds before. "Status on enemy fleet?" she asked. Marcus checked his readings quickly. 23 warships remaining, Admiral. Several are heavily damaged, but they are forming a new defensive line around their flagship. It looks like they're preparing for a coordinated attack. Elena nodded slowly. "They're smart. Even after that first hit, they're not giving up. We need to keep pressing our advantage before they can fully regroup." Outside, the battle among the fighters continued fiercely. Captain Diego Reyes weaved his Falcon fighter between streams of enemy plasma fire, chasing down a group of Kryvax fighters that had been harassing one of the surface weapon platforms. "Break left, now." He called out to his squadron as a group of enemy fighters attempted to flank them. His pilots responded instantly, breaking formation in a practiced maneuver that scattered the enemy's attack pattern. "Nice move, Captain," said one of his wingmen, a young pilot named Lieutenant Priya Anand. "Where did you learn that one?" "Simulation number 412, Diego replied with a small grin, even in the middle of battle. "Guess all those years of training finally paid off." Despite the tension, small moments of humor like this helped keep the pilots calm. Fear was always present, but focus and trust in their training kept panic from taking over. Back on Prometheus, Elena turned her attention to the larger strategic picture. The ship's main cannon, though powerful, needed time to recharge after each shot. During that recharge period, Prometheus relied on its secondary weapons and defensive shields to hold the line. "Main cannon at 60% charge," Marcus reported. "Another 2 minutes before we can fire it again. Then we use everything else we have," Elena said. "Bring secondary weapons online. Target their smaller ships first. Thin out their numbers before they can fully regroup around the flagship." Rows of smaller cannons along the length of Prometheus opened fire, sending streams of concentrated energy toward the scattered Kryvax warships. Ship after ship was struck, their weaker shields unable to withstand the constant barrage. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, as more enemy vessels were destroyed or crippled. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, General Draal watched his fleet being slowly torn apart. His anger had cooled into something colder and more calculating. He was beginning to understand that this battle could not be won through simple brute force alone. "General," Khal Thresh reported, "if we continue losing ships at this rate, we will not survive another direct hit from their main weapon." Draal's mind raced. He had never faced an enemy this well prepared before. Every previous conquest had been simple, worlds overwhelmed quickly by the sheer power of the Kryvax fleet. This was different. This was a species that had hidden its strength perfectly, waited patiently, and struck at exactly the right moment. "Send a signal to the Dominion Council," Draal ordered finally. "Inform them that Earth's defenses are far stronger than our scouts reported. Request reinforcements immediately." "Sending the signal now, General. However, it will take time for any reinforcements to arrive from the nearest fleet staging point." Draal clenched his fists. Time was something he did not have much of. "Then we must survive until they arrive. All ships, focus fire on their smaller vessels. If we cannot destroy their flagship yet, We weaken their support instead. The Kryvax fleet shifted tactics, turning their combined firepower toward the human fighter squadrons and surface weapon platforms, rather than directly engaging Prometheus. Diego's squadron found themselves suddenly facing a much heavier assault, as enemy warships added their firepower to the smaller fighter battles. "Admiral, our fighters are taking heavy fire," Marcus reported urgently. "Several squadrons are requesting support." Elena's jaw tightened. She had known this battle would come with a cost, but hearing her people in danger was never easy. "Divert secondary weapons to cover our fighters. Keep the pressure on their smaller ships, but protect our pilots." Prometheus adjusted its firing pattern, focusing precise strikes to protect the vulnerable human fighters darting through the chaos of battle. Diego felt the sudden relief of enemy fire being pulled away from his squadron, as Prometheus's massive cannons cleared a path through the incoming Kryvax attacks. "Thank you, big sister," Diego muttered under his breath, a nickname some of the pilots had given to Prometheus during their years of training together. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, though in reality, it had only been a little over 30 minutes since Prometheus first emerged from the moon. Both sides were taking heavy losses, but slowly, steadily, the balance was shifting in humanity's favor. The surprise of the hidden warship, combined with the discipline and training of its crew, was proving to be more than the Kryvax fleet could handle. "Main cannon fully charged," Marcus reported finally. Elena looked at the tactical display, studying the Kryvax formation carefully. General Draal had gathered his remaining ships into a tight defensive cluster around the Devourer of Stars, hoping to overwhelm Prometheus with combined fire before it could land another devastating blow. "They're clustered together, hoping to protect their flagship," Elena said, almost to herself. "But that also makes them a perfect target." She turned to her weapons officer. "Charge the main cannon for a wide-area strike. If we can hit their formation while they're grouped together, we end this battle now." "Understood, Admiral. Charging for wide-area discharge." Aboard the Devourer of Stars, sensors once again detected the massive buildup of energy from Prometheus. "General, they're charging their main weapon again. Power levels are even higher than before." Draal's eyes widened as he realized the danger. "Break formation. Scatter immediately." But it was too late. The tightly clustered Kryvax ships could not scatter quickly enough. Prometheus fired, unleashing a massive wave of energy that spread wide across the battlefield, striking multiple ships within the Kryvax formation simultaneously. The result was devastating. Explosions ripped through the Kryvax fleet as ship after ship was caught in the wide blast, their shields overwhelmed by the sheer power of the attack. The Devourer of Stars itself was struck along its already damaged side, sending the massive vessel spinning slightly as internal explosions rocked its structure. "Damage report," Draal shouted, gripping the edge of his command chair as alarms blared throughout the bridge. "Multiple systems failing. We've lost over half our remaining fleet in that single strike. Main power core is unstable." Draal stared at the wreckage spreading across his screen. Ships that had served the Kryvax Dominion for decades, reduced to burning debris in the span of a few seconds. For the first time in his long career, he felt the true weight of defeat approaching. Aboard Prometheus, cheers briefly broke out among the bridge crew as the massive strike found its mark, though Elena quickly called for calm, knowing the battle was not yet fully over. "Status on remaining enemy forces?" she asked. Marcus checked his readings, his voice carrying a note of cautious relief. "Only 6 enemy ships remain combat-capable, Admiral, including their damaged flagship. Our fighter squadrons report minimal losses. Surface platforms remain fully operational." Elena allowed herself a small breath of relief, though she knew the fight was not over yet. Draal, though badly beaten, was not yet defeated, and a wounded enemy could still be dangerous. "Continue pressing the advantage," she ordered. "But keep formation. This isn't finished until their remaining ships either surrender or retreat." On the Devourer of Stars, Draal stared at the wreckage of his once mighty fleet, now reduced to a handful of damaged ships. The pride that had once filled his voice was gone, replaced by the cold reality of his situation. "General," Kal said quietly. "Orders?" Draal was silent for a long moment, staring at the human warship that had shattered his fleet in less than an hour. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with something he had never expected to feel toward a species he had once considered beneath him: respect. mixed with fear. "Signal all remaining ships," he said slowly. "Prepare for retreat." It was a word General Drow had never once spoken in his entire military career. But as he looked at the ruins of his fleet scattered across the space around Earth's moon, he understood that today, for the first time, the Kryvax Dominion had met an enemy it could not simply overpower. The battle for the moon was nearing its end, but for humanity, this victory was only the beginning of a much larger story. The order to retreat spread quickly through what remained of the Kryvax fleet. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, General Drow watched his surviving ships begin to pull away from the battlefield, their damaged hulls trailing streams of gas and debris as they struggled to escape the range of Prometheus's weapons. "Admiral," Marcus said, watching the enemy movement carefully. "They're retreating. Should we pursue?" Elena studied the tactical display for a long moment. Part of her wanted to finish the fight completely, to make sure the Kryvax Dominion understood without doubt what had happened here today. But another part of her, the part shaped by years of careful strategic training, knew that letting a defeated enemy retreat sometimes served a greater purpose than destroying them completely. "Hold formation," she said finally. "Let them go." Marcus glanced at her, slightly surprised. "Admiral? If we destroy them completely, the Kryvax Dominion may see it as an act, with no message beyond raw destruction," Elena explained. "But if we let a defeated enemy return home and report exactly what happened here, they will understand something far more important. That Earth is not weak, that Earth is not an easy target, and that any future attack will come at a terrible cost." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom in her words, signaling all units to hold position and allow enemy retreat. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, General Drow watched as the massive human warship made no move to pursue his retreating fleet. For a moment, confusion crossed his face, quickly followed by a deeper realization. The humans were not simply reacting with anger or fear. They were making a calculated choice, allowing him to survive so that his defeat could be witnessed by the wider Kryvax Dominion. It was, in its own way, more humbling than if they had simply destroyed his remaining ships. "Set course for the nearest fleet staging point," Droll said quietly to his crew. "We return home." As the last of the Kryvax warships disappeared into the darkness of space, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. Wreckage from dozens of destroyed ships floated silently around the moon, a permanent reminder of the battle that had just taken place. Slowly, cheers began to spread through Prometheus, quiet at first, then growing louder as the reality of their victory began to sink in. Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile as she watched her crew celebrate around her. They had done it. 30 years of secret preparation, sacrifice, and hard work had led to this single moment, and humanity had passed its first true test against an alien empire. But even as the celebration continued, Elena knew this was only the beginning of a much larger story. Back on Earth, in the underground bunker in Geneva, President Elias Grant and his advisors watched the final moments of the battle through the data feeds sent from Prometheus. When the last Kryvax ship disappeared from their screens, the entire room erupted into celebration, years of tension finally breaking free. "We did it," President Grant said quietly, almost in disbelief. "After all these years, we actually did it." One of his advisors, a woman named Dr. Naomi Chen, who had worked on Project Chimera since its earliest days, wiped tears from her eyes. 30 years, she whispered. 30 years of secrets, sacrifice, and hope. And it worked. President Grant turned to face the room fully. "Now comes the hard part," he said, his voice growing serious once again. "The rest of the world needs to know the truth. Not just about the attack, but about what we built to stop it." Within days, the story of the battle above the moon spread across the entire planet. At first, governments released only limited information, careful not to cause mass panic. But soon, full details emerged. The world learned about Project Chimera, about the warship Prometheus, and about the secret sacrifices made by thousands of people over 30 years to protect humanity from a threat most people never even knew existed. Reactions across Earth were mixed. Some people felt betrayed, angry that such a massive secret had been kept from them for so long. Others felt overwhelming pride and relief, grateful that their leaders had prepared for a danger they could not have imagined on their own. Slowly, As the shock faded, most of humanity came to understand the difficult choices that had been made, and a new sense of unity began to grow across the world. For the first time in history, humanity understood clearly that it was not alone in the universe, and that understanding brought both fear and strength. Aboard Prometheus, life slowly returned to a new kind of normal. The ship remained near the moon, now openly acknowledged by the world as humanity's first true warship. Repairs were made to the surface structures destroyed during the battle, and new, stronger defenses were built, this time without the need for secrecy. Admiral Elena Cross stood once again on the bridge of her ship, looking out at the moon's surface through the main viewport. Marcus Webb approached and stood beside her, both of them quiet for a long moment. "Do you think they'll come back?" Marcus asked finally. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Yes," she said. "Empires like the Kryvax Dominion don't simply give up after one defeat. They will come back, eventually, and probably with a much larger fleet than before." "Are we ready for that?" Elena turned to look at him, a small, determined smile on her face. "We built Prometheus in secret, alone, with nothing but our own hands and our own courage. Now, the whole world knows the truth, and the whole world will help us prepare. Whatever comes next, we won't be facing it in secret anymore. We'll be facing it together." Far beyond the edge of the solar system, aboard the damaged Devourer of Stars, General Draal returned to Kryvax territory to report his defeat to the High Council. It was not an easy report to give. For the first time in his long career, he had to admit failure, standing before leaders who valued strength above all else. But even as he prepared for the difficult judgment that awaited him, Draal found himself thinking about the strange, determined species he had encountered. Humans, weak and primitive by Kryvax standards, had somehow built a weapon capable of shattering an entire invasion fleet, hidden perfectly for decades without detection. It was a level of patience and unity that even the disciplined Kryvax Dominion rarely achieved. Word of Earth's hidden warship spread quickly through Kryvax space, and eventually, through much of the wider galaxy. Other species, long oppressed under the shadow of powerful empires like the Kryvax Dominion, began to whisper stories about the small blue world that had hidden its strength perfectly and struck back with devastating force when attacked. To some, it became a story of caution. To others, it became a story of hope. Back on Earth, as repairs continued and new defenses were built, humanity stood at the edge of a new chapter in its history. The secret was out. The war, everyone understood, was far from over. But for the first time, Earth did not face the future alone or unprepared. Admiral Elena Cross looked out once more at the stars beyond the moon, knowing that somewhere out there, a much larger battle was still waiting to be fought. But standing on the bridge of Prometheus, surrounded by a crew who had proven their courage and skill in humanity's darkest hour, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time: hope. Humanity had been tested, and humanity had survived. Whatever the Kryvax Dominion, or any other threat among the stars, chose to send next, Earth would be ready, not through secrets and isolation, but through unity, courage, and the quiet strength that had been growing beneath the surface of the moon for 30 long years. The war for humanity's place among the stars had only just begun, but for the first time, the people of Earth looked up at the night sky not with fear, but with determination, knowing that somewhere among those quiet stars, their greatest secret had finally become their greatest strength. The end.